Hello everyone, my name is Philip Orlovskyi. We are a developer in Bali. We build in Bali. But today is a little bit out of our league. We're launching this experimental format, so we'd love to hear your likes and comments. We decided, I decided to call the format without renders. This will be a format about agencies, about agents, about real estate agency owners, and it's going to be a B2B format. In other words, we decided to make it interesting, first and foremost for agents. But I'm sure investors will watch it too, so that investors can better understand the agent market, who to work with, which agency to choose, and basically, how to best build relationships with agents. Today, we have our partners with us, the company Nexus, a company with quite a lot of experience in the market, as individuals, but not so long ago, as I understand, they got together. They organized themselves. Dmitry Orlovskyi will probably tell us more, one of the founders, and probably the owner of the title for the most beautiful and largest office in Ubud.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Dmitry Orlovskyi. I'm the sales director and a partner at Bali Nexus. You were right to point out, we opened this year. So on January 10th, basically, will be our first anniversary since we officially registered the company. And in such a short time, we've managed a lot. We've already built quite a bit. As for the office, like I said, it's one of the most beautiful. Honestly, we get a ton of compliments. You've been to the office. We've had a lot of people from other companies, other agencies, clients all visit us.
We all actually dream of opening a showroom in this office. We're talking with the developer about opening several showrooms there together. Tell us, just give a little backstory. How did it all start? Who are you and your partner? What do you do, and why? Honestly, at first I felt a bit of dissonance despite your experience, because you set the bar so high right away with this office. I mean, really, the office feels like this huge machine, like Google and Bali. But I know your experience, it's just that not everyone else does. Maybe you could share a little about it.
We met 2 years ago, right after I flew in from America. You were probably the first person I met in Bali. I remember we met for the first time at Mango Cafe. We didn't meet at the airport already. A little about me. I was born in Ukraine. A long time ago, about 10 years ago, I left Ukraine for America. I spent 8 years in New York. I work in real estate, working at some of the largest companies in America, brokerages in America. Moving to Bali wasn't spontaneous. It was a well thought out decision to move to Bali, but it took some time. It took about 2 years, I think, to gather my strength, my thoughts, and everything else to make this move, to relocate. And so when we arrived in Bali, I worked at a few companies where I saw how things operate, how the market works. At some point, maybe about a year ago, my partner and we used to say, no, never our own business. No, that's too hard. That's too much. No, that's not for us. And then, literally, in a short period of time, circumstances just came together. As a result, we opened our own company, which is 90% focused on the international market, on international standards, on bringing in experience from New York, which we gained there, yes, in order to bring fresh blood, fresh breath to the Bali market in order to maybe transform this market. Actually, let me explain to many people here why I chose Dima as the very first one. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It might seem like the agency hasn't been around for that long, but first of all, the guys work and focus exclusively on English-speaking leads. We'll talk more about this because, as you can see for yourself, in just about half a year, the market has taken you from being an unknown agency with English-speaking leads, people wondering why you're even working with them, to a position where there's practically no competition. Speaking for myself, this is one of the very few agencies that works excellently with an English-speaking audience, and as a company, we see the future only in that direction right now. Plus, there's also your experience in New York. I see a really big difference between, not just between Russian-speaking agencies and English-speaking agencies, but even among the English-speaking ones, there are agencies here that have been on the market for a long time, like those Australian ones, the more established ones that work with catalogs, kind of the old guard, right? But you guys actually brought some kind of mix into this whole story. That really impresses me, so I encourage everyone, first of all, to stop by the office and chat with the team. These innovations are something else. Can you tell me what is the main difference, like after all these years?
Well, there are a lot of differences. You mean the difference from New York, right? How did you even get through all of that?
Honestly, I think I'm still going through it because there's still so much left behind in New York, friends, family. Sometimes people say there's this really cool TV show. I recommend it to anyone interested in real estate or just curious about it in general. There's this top agent in America. He made his own TV show. And when my team or someone else watches it, they're like, oh my God, they're so cutthroat. They're so aggressive. How do people even survive there? We talked about this in the team, and I said, well, in Bali, it's actually the same thing. You just don't see those people. I just think that in Bali, the people who are tough enough, pragmatic enough, focused, and driven, they're the ones who succeed. People who are still searching for themselves, maybe as an agent, maybe as a yoga instructor, or something else, for the most part, don't really achieve much in Bali. They're always in a constant state of searching. But this, focus. And when you cut out the noise around you, when you start to see the potential of this market, right? Compared to, say, New York, the Bali market is only 4.5 billion. Yeah, that's the current size of the market today. But I think the prospects here are much more interesting because this market is new, it's developing, it's exciting. I see more and more how the English speaking audience is looking at this market like it's a hype. They're trying to figure it out because it's hard to understand. Understanding leaseholds and freeholds is also something we'll probably talk about later. But probably the coolest thing is that my New York experience helps me make a quick leap here. Not wasting time, but making a fast move when you speak the same language. With people, it doesn't matter if it's $100,000 or $10 million. You speak the same language, you understand where you came from, where they came from, and so on.
When the most significant deal finally took place.
It was an interesting moment. But this year, for this 1 year so far, we still have it.
NYC Gem.
And in New York, it's a highlight.
For me, it's fascinating.
Experience, not a highlight. It was 18 million.
Was that a deal?
Yep.
What was it?
It was an apartment. It was an apartment in one of the coolest buildings on 57th Street, called 157. By the way, the client didn't come through some. It doesn't work like that in New York. There's no such thing as regeneration there. There, everything goes through your own people, through acquaintances, The person just came through my friends and said he was looking for something in the 4 to 5 million range for a son, who would eventually go study at Columbia University. And most likely he would live in that apartment. But for now, he would rent it out. Then the crisis hit. Not exactly a crisis, but COVID. And prices dropped dramatically. So, for example, an apartment that was on the market for 27 was being sold for 17.5. So that's almost, well, a bit more than that, for 17.5. So we made a deal, and he bought it. From a budget of 4 to 5 million, he just went 3 times higher. To me,
it seems like for many agencies in Bali, that's like 2 or 3 years worth of turnover.
But I want to point out, deals in New York take at least 6 to 9 months each. And deals like this can take even longer.
How long did this deal take?
About a year.
About
a year. Because we started at some point, then COVID hit, prices crashed. And then that lucky moment came. It just turned in our favor and helped. And
if you don't mind me asking, as a broker, roughly speaking, on average per year, how much did you make? Did you sell about 50 million worth?
It really varied a lot. Actually, when I started, in my first year, I only did about 1.2 million for the whole year. I didn't know English. I couldn't speak English back then. It's not just that you can't say apartment, you can't even come up with a joke. The words are on the tip of your tongue, but you just can't say them in English. And it's really great when you can connect, when you can crack a joke, when you feel free. Then, yeah, as your English gets better, as your language skills improve, and once you start building connections, that year was probably around 50 million, because that was the biggest one. But on average, it was, I don't know, because these are personal sales, about 4 to 10 million. Another great thing about America is this. In New York, it's all about rentals. It's fast money. So rentals there work really quickly. It's a bit different from how it is in Bali. And with rentals, you could also make $20,000, $40,000 just from a single rental. That's when it's a luxury apartment being rented out. That's why we always made yearly plans. The company would always push us toward this, suggesting things like write down your plans, which clients you're working with, which deals might close, and so on. So we did plan, but it's still really hard to plan everything out.
Okay, let's switch from New York back to Bali. The Balinese market. Right now, especially agencies that used to work with the CIS market are going through, let's say, a very strange period. Yeah, things are being restructured and so on. You work with the English speaking market, so I'm curious to know what this year was like for the international market. Meaning, how did you experience it?
I have almost nothing to compare it to from previous years, because it was like this. A transformation, and now it's another transformation. It's still ongoing, the market is stabilizing, and I see more and more that people, especially in Europe, are interested in the Bali market, not just as an investment, but as a second home. Because in Europe, taxes keep going up, and there are various political situations that make people look at other countries. And for them, Bali is one of those interesting potential places where they could move if needed. Or save money for retirement, or there are all sorts of reasons. And I want to say that when I was more involved in the Russian speaking market and so on, my understanding was completely different. How the Russian speaking real estate market works. There are big deals in the Russian speaking segment, but they're probably at their peak. So the deal happens and everyone is happy. So there's a certain level here. A certain budget level, they're higher, they're more stable, they're clear, and they're different from the Russian speaking audience. And I want to say that the main goal is to build the Bali brand, to build the Bali brand so that Bali is clear to any buyer, any investor. It's clear from a legal standpoint, from the perspective of safety, finances, and so on. And that's our task as an agency, to develop educational materials for investors, so that it's not only easy for us to work with them, but also easy for you as a developer to work with them. Because when we talk about you, about your company, they can trust us and you 100%, knowing that you are our partners. So in this case, we're all in the same boat with you. We don't really separate your market and our market, but what we definitely do is work toward a common goal, that's for sure.
All agencies are facing the same main pain point right now, something I've been dealing with for about 2 years already. I've heard that when you start an English speaking department in your agency, and you've been in agencies that have opened or are opening an English speaking division, the main issue is that it's an incredibly different audience. The deal cycle is 3 to 4 months, and the approach is different. So, regarding the length of the deal cycle, how do you handle that? Because even for me, most of our deals are still with Russian speaking clients. But we do have foreign clients, and that's a completely different market. Sometimes I feel like in this podcast, we're talking to each other like we're from different planets. How do you deal with that? I'll speak for myself. It's hard for us to handle this.
First of all, we don't expect quick results. And we didn't expect them either, since we came from the New York market, which already showed us that a deal cycle can take 4, 6, 9 months, or even a year. So for us, this was predictable. And when we were building our team, we never told them, look, you'll close a deal in your first month. And considering the experience of the people I hired, not all of them had worked in real estate before, but they did have sales experience. They needed to learn this market. So now the people who started in March or April already have a steady base of regular clients, which is snowballed over time. With new clients coming in, we realize there are two types of clients. I'm just entering the market. And the second type of clients, I am already in the market, but I haven't made up my mind yet. And of course, this second type is the most interesting for us because we've had cases like that. We've had deals close in 10 days.
I mean, those do happen.
Yes, we've had deals close in 10 days. When a person already knows more or less what they want, they just need to choose the right product. And then in that case, the deal happens quickly, obviously. And
I'll tell you, I'm starting to notice now that brokers who work with the Russian speaking market and those who work with the English speaking market are actually different kinds of brokers. Because for the most part, Russian speaking brokers still don't really understand how in this market you can work with a client for 6 months and not see any money from them. So the main point is, we were just talking recently, that you need to build relationships with each client. You need to create value for them. And then, maybe, in 3, 4, 5 months, they might come back to you with a deal. And there are also clients who will come back after a year. And there are clients who will come back sooner. But overall, you have a client base, and it's constantly growing. So you always have about 50 clients that you need to support and nurture. It's like a client farm, you could say. You're growing them. And this is fundamentally different from what we've been doing in the market for the past few years.
One hand, I agree. On the other hand, speaking for myself, what I've actually seen deals here that happened quickly. Why is that? How? Even though people would come in with requests and the decision-making cycle was supposed to be 6 months, they would close in 10 to 18 days. And so on. When you need to, you really have to figure out why, what the reason is for that. If someone is selling their property in Spain or somewhere else and they need the money, that's one scenario when you or the agent really digs deep and realizes that the person just doesn't understand this market. They've set aside 6 months in their mind to figure everything out, but when they find someone who can explain things to them properly, they move much faster. So, look, I would say the real deal cycle is 8 to 10 weeks. So, 8 to 10 weeks, that's a normal deal cycle for an English speaking client. There are also firms that take a year or more, and with those, we're basically just feeding them along with some interesting options on the market, some hot deals and so on. But the process of assisting a valued client in truly comprehending complex information and various nuances, and then reaching a well-informed and confident decision entirely on their own terms and initiative, that is undoubtedly the most challenging and demanding aspect of this entire profession. So why is that exactly? Because for Russian speakers working in the English-speaking market, this mentality is hard to understand. How do you even explain it? In the Russian-speaking market, sometimes you can play on scarcity, like if you don't take it now, and that really works with our mentality. So once I told a Swiss guy, look, take it now, because this villa won't be available anymore. He said to me, are you kidding? What, there won't be any more villas in Bali or what? So basically it didn't work. Pressure, like that kind of pressure, it just doesn't work there. Scarcity doesn't work there, like let's do it before New Year's or Black Friday. Okay, that's cool, but you have to use a different approach. We recently closed a deal with you, and it was right during Black Friday discounts. But this person was already in the market. He was ready, just looking for the right price and product value. So anything is possible.
As for brokers, again, I'm talking about my own pain points. Right now, we see that even people who speak conversational English aren't enough for Europeans. They're not American enough. People still want to talk to natives, and ideally, it should be someone from the country that's selling. But I saw that your team has people from the CIS. So you're still hoping that or are brokers from the CIS just that good? Because from my side, I see that more and more we're coming to the point where, in a truly European or American broker, the staff should be European or American. And specifically, these should be Europeans and Americans.
Right now, for me, it's 60 to 40. 60. That is, among the 40%, there are Russian-speaking and Ukrainian-speaking guys who know English. Yes, it's hard for them, but 90% of the time we work with England, the English-speaking market. But still, to find those 10% that we select, the Russian-speaking market, not from CIS countries, but foreigners, Russian-speaking people who live in other countries. We also target New York and Miami, specifically where there is a Russian-speaking diaspora. There are a lot of Russian-speaking investors in Dubai too, so they're a bit different, but you can generally work with them as well, and Russian-speaking guys do work with them. But in my team, we have German, Italian, and French speakers. Spanish has just been added, as well as Portuguese and Hindi. So now, with this set, we can definitely work with 7 or 8 languages and adapt as needed. There is a case when an Arab client and an Arab agent started working with an Indian client. After the first meeting, the Indian client said, I don't want to work with an Arab agent. Please find me someone else.
It's actually good when they say it, but very often they just stop communicating altogether. And sometimes it's not always possible to get that feedback. Which country showed that kind of result for you this year?
The Netherlands, yes. The highest number of deals was with the Netherlands, but the largest deals were with the USA.
So the USA, the Netherlands, and India haven't managed to get any of them going yet.
We haven't managed to get any of them going yet, even though we have a Hindi-speaking Indian on the team, but still nothing so far. They have an interesting culture. No matter what, they'll always push until the very end, squeeze out the last possible discounts, and most likely they'll buy the cheapest thing at first just to test the market. India, statistically speaking, is still number one or number two in terms of investments in Dubai. And for them, they are still very cautious about leasehold. So for them to work through this issue, this leasehold objection, considering the cultural aspect, wanting to buy something cheaper but as profitable as possible, these things just don't complement each other. So it's a very complex job I know you've had deals with Indians, so we will keep working on it.
You see the potential.
Furthermore, there is currently a comprehensive strategic plan in place to establish a fully functional regional representative branch office in India that would facilitate and manage sales operations throughout the entirety of Southeast Asia.
So let me ask you this. In 2026, which countries are you betting on? Two countries that, in your opinion, a year from now, will meet again. Which two countries will be your leaders next year?
If I had to make a choice, I would probably place my bet on the continent of Europe. While it is certainly not a single country, it is comprised of many diverse European nations. And when I look at the current landscape, I see a wealth of history, culture, and potential that is truly impressive. An interesting market. Still, Dubai, which is looking at Dubai, is also looking at Bali.
And what about the US?
I just had an agent from Dubai join my team as well. He moved to Bali, worked for 2 years in Dubai in the real estate market. He's originally from Colombia, speaks Spanish, French, and English. After a few, we've been talking since April. We've been in touch with this agent since April so that he would join us. And after all his weighing of options and hours, he decided to join us because he saw the potential. And he had only one condition. I want to work in two markets. I want to bring the Dubai market, clients, and my own base, potentially to Bali. And of course, we shook hands on it because it's interesting.
What about the US?
You said two countries, and I mentioned the US as a third.
Yeah?
Yes, the US too. Since the US is pretty close to me, and I understand what's going on there. Right now, we're working on a deal with a client from Hollywood. He worked with Steven Spielberg, so he's pretty well known. He's buying a second house for himself here. A second home. And he says, after that, I also want to invest. So these are the kinds of clients coming in. Either it's a second residence for them, so they can live between Los Angeles and Bali, and also invest on top of that.
A lot of people fly here and want to check things out. What does a second home look like for Americans in Bali?
That's interesting. They usually look at complexes. So they want to live in a complex. They want a lobby, they want services, they want security. Because in the neighborhoods where they live, the community here is a bit more scattered. So there isn't really a specific.
For some reason, I feel like this is the kind of thing that's the future, right? And Bali too. These are like gated communities with some infrastructure, like a lobby, a restaurant, but with premium villas. So basically,
this is the kind of villa chose for himself, right in the loggy.
I think it could fit 1.5, even 2 people in that kind of format. So that's what's missing, because everyone wants to live in some kind of community with some kind of infrastructure.
Any case, when they choose a second home, they even say that they will be here. For 5 to 6 months, they wanted it to be a community where people live for a long time, not just Airbnb guests coming and going. It's about safety, and again, it's about knowing your neighbors, who lives next door, and so on. Consequently, this is precisely the reason why I am now hearing from a growing number of professional real estate developers that their very next major complex will be specifically designed for dedicated long-term residents and stayers, essentially meaning people who will truly live there for a very long time to come. And that's where our villas will start. Like $2.2 million.
Well, you still have to find clients for that.
Yes.
All the developers? The thing is, right now I can't even say which area you should build in, because we're also looking into this. But I see Sese, Nuanu, basically in that area, just besides Sese and Nuanu. I don't really see it. The potential for premium villas in these communities? Let's be honest. Because Bukit is still going to be more middle class. I don't see anything super premium there. The roads just aren't always suitable. Maybe later, when Pikachu Bukit is finished, there will be better infrastructure. Right now, we're building a few villas in Bukit, near Nosador. But for me, there's just not enough infrastructure for a premium segment. I mean, you can live there, it's a nice place to live, but not in that premium format. Everything about Huyana, I believe in it, because I think Renalvoza will be fully developed there. That'll be some kind of premium, and that's it.
Ubud also still remains a pretty unique neighborhood. The nature there is untouched, the jungle, the views. So I think that the north of Ubud, that's between Kintamani, where it's cooler, not hot like in Bukit. Still, the nature there is untouched, and that's what attracts the premium segment. Yeah, when I was talking to one potential client there, not really a client actually, she was studying there. She was studying hospitality in Switzerland. She said that luxury or being premium is when you have options, meaning only a few people have that choice, or you have restaurants, cafes, and so on nearby, places you can easily get to. And I think the north of Ubud now offers that kind of mix. You can get to the center quickly, but still stay. Somewhat secluded, surrounded by nature, just you and your family, one on one.
Okay, for Americans, it's clear these will be some kind of residences, like a second home. I think the concept of a second home for the next 2026 to 2028 period is where the market is heading. We're seeing that too. What about Europeans? Where do you think Europeans are looking?
I would put it this way: Europeans are looking for where to invest their money efficiently, optimize taxes in their own countries, because those are still continuing to go up. And we do have clients from the UK, from England, a client who is looking for herself. She had two hotels in England, she sold them, and she has two daughters. And now they're moving to Bali. So in April, she's coming. She's already picked out a villa with us, and we'll also kind of. But most people are still looking for where and how they can optimize, how they can confidently invest their money and earn from it.
What kind of income do they expect in Bali? You.
Percentage?
ROI? What is acceptable for Europeans right now? I have a feeling that now things are going to roll back to that. I feel like a few years ago, we all used to say that Europeans were satisfied with some minimal percentages. But I get the sense, correct me if I'm wrong, that Europeans have been watching Russian speaking developers. And if a year ago you said 8% was enough, now I've already heard a few conversations where people are like, man, there are projects offering 14%. Now we want 14%. How do you deal with that? How much of this is actually because we understand that returns in Bali, optimism, they correlate, they adjust. The returns in Bali will eventually settle at some numbers. Even now, they're already at 10 to 12%. So we need to understand what Europeans are ready for. In other words, for developers, what financial models will work for them now? What kind of returns for investors?
Europeans will be ready for it, depending on how we explain all of this to them. And so we carefully create our very own unique advertisements, which serve as powerful points of attraction for everyone, podcasts and so on. We are the ones creating this demand. We create it ourselves. The more we inflate their expectations, the harder it is for us to deal with it later. That's why I think we all need to switch to educational materials that explain the real situation in Bali. And I think that when Europeans see these numbers, they won't be scared off by them. But generally, when we work with Europeans, we don't even ask. By the way, the first question Europeans ask is never about ROI. Not ROI. The first question is about the experience of the management company. Yeah, I mean, it's clear that the returns depend directly on that, on which management company will be working, what experience they have, and so on. But that's their first question, and only after that comes the question about ROI. Also, Europeans can understand, if you explain it to them properly, that the business they're entering at the very beginning, like at the construction stage or during the first year of the business. If you communicate it to them correctly, they'll understand that this kind of business needs time to grow, and that eventually you'll earn what you want and what you planned. This takes time, so it's painstaking work, explaining, showing things, presenting the numbers, and so on.
Am I right in understanding that, for example, if we take two projects, a riskier one that could yield 10 to 12%, say at the construction stage, or a ready-made project with a hotel operator that offers 5 to 6%, they would most likely choose.
But, I would also break this down a bit by age.
Break it down.
Yes. Young people would go for the riskier project. They're willing to take risks. Those who are into crypto and blockchains, they understand the risks and so on. So for them, it's more understandable. If we're talking about people who are middle aged and older, they need stability. There, a different factor is important.
So there are both kinds of projects. Within the company, we always weigh things too. For example, if you bring in a major hotel operator, your returns might immediately drop to 5 to 6% in that kind of scenario. If the Russian-speaking segment doesn't understand this, then for foreigners, it's actually more clear. And what about our age-old question regarding foreigners? Do they prefer buying at the foundation stage or when it's ready?
As confirmation, what's the company's track record? So if this is their first project, most likely they'll walk away from it. If it's not their first project and they're already completed properties, they can check them out, feel the quality, see it with their own eyes, look at the data on how those projects were delivered, and so on. I think that's also a decisive factor for Europeans getting involved.
So foundation stage properties are selling them.
Yes. I want to say that our deals this year were split 50-50. For foundation stage properties, we had a higher share. About 65% were resales or already completed properties. Well,
See, that means the market can.
what? Yes, yes. I think these myths about English speakers and so on mostly circulate among Russian speakers who talk about it without really understanding, because we work with hundreds of them every day. We see their objections, we see their faces, we see their eyes and how they reason things out. That's why we understand that working with them isn't scary. You just need patience. You need to explain things and not approach the conversation from the perspective of, I'm selling to you, but rather from the perspective of, I understand what you need. Let's look at the reality. Let's look at the real market. Among individuals who speak the Russian language, and among those who communicate in English, there is almost always some unfortunate or negative encounter with an agent in the past, and so on. And it is primarily due to the fact that an agent needs to make a sale, and sometimes by any means necessary, but unfortunately, that doesn't work for English speakers. They have a long history of working with agents and so on.
So we've been analyzing this for several years, and gradually, in my opinion, we've shifted toward the view that, of course, everything that's said about the English-speaking market is mostly said by those who have tried to work in that market. Unfortunately, many have tried. But again, I'm probably a skeptic when it comes to non-native agents. That is, as an interim solution, it works. But here another problem arises. If you're the head of the sales department, realistically, and this is also a kind of utopia, you won't be able to hire native speakers, because to hire natives, you need to understand them, how to work with them. And that's also a problem, because it's a completely different mentality in this regard. And we see why, I'll repeat it again, we're starting these podcasts with Dima, because we see how the agency is developing along the right, well-trodden international path. There's a bit of a Russian accent to it, but that's actually good because there's this drive, this energy. Because what I don't like about foreign agencies is that they don't have it here. That drive. Everyone's just kind of like this, you know. You guys have that drive. It's awesome, and I really like that. That movement, which is happening.
We talked to some English speaking agencies who've been on the market for 12 years or so and so on. They have no idea how to sell to the floor at all, and they don't sell it, they don't offer it, they don't know how to work with it. And here we probably have the right mix, where we know how to sell it in the plan, what kinds of properties have been built, and how to sell land. So that's the thing. And that gives us an advantage even over those who have been on the market for 12 years.
So, about the neighborhoods, what do Europeans like? I often get this kind of silence from people who ask agencies that manage to close deals with foreigners. Like, which neighborhoods?
Definitely not something else.
Europeans don't really like anything in particular.
Although,
Azgaya.
Australians like it. Yesterday, I had this interesting client who said, I want to be right next to this hotel. I said, okay, we have the EXO project, seriously. Yesterday, it was exactly this kind of story. He told me 5 minutes. Okay, that works. I want villas. I said, well, not all the villas there are probably available. It was an interesting conversation there, but I want to say that Australia, yes, it is possible, but the top popular request still remains. By the way, the Australians are Canggu and Seminyak. Here are two such points that are straight.
The family still, before?
Still, Yes, for odontologists, it's still like youth. Here we were, I want to buy the proportions there now. Therefore, for the rest of the population, Ubud and Bukit currently remain the top search queries. So far, no one is looking strongly towards the east.
Let's talk about your space that you opened, which I think is right in the heart of the city. It's really the most central spot, right in the center. If you haven't been, you definitely need to stop by. Kiev, smoothly for you. How many square meters is it? Well, it's an incredible amount. Up to how many square meters is it there?
It's about 1,000 square meters, roughly a 3-story building. The third floor, well, our lower floor, is actually for staff. There's the kitchen, lounge areas, and so on. The first floor is entirely dedicated to sales and to meeting rooms, meaning client meetings, reception, and so on. And the third floor is occupied by the support staff, meaning those who. That's marketing, HR, and lawyers.
What's the agency size?
39. 39 people. We didn't think we'd have 39 by the end of the year, but here we are, 39 people. And we want to keep developing marketing because we also see marketing in this. Not just targeting and so on. It's also podcasts, it's video, it's implementing artificial intelligence in every possible way. In general, there's an idea to develop in the tech or IT field, or even in real estate. An agency, meaning one that is as automated as possible, as structured as possible in terms of having all the processes set up, using artificial intelligence with video and so on. That's why. But again, an important point here is not to lose the human touch because there's so much advertising, so much Instagram is running ads and so on. There is a category of people for whom this kind of thing, just a 5-minute meeting, a quick chat, and they get everything they need. They know who to move forward with.
What percentage of your clients are like that? In general, how much does an agency in Bali and Ubud actually need an office?
Actually, I think it's important for everyone. For any agency, it's important. It doesn't matter if it's in Ubud or anywhere else, really. We've successfully acquired an exceptionally significant volume of new clients over the course of this year from other agencies without doing anything special just because we have an office. Especially for English-speaking audiences, it's so important for them. It gives them a sense of stability. A sense of stability. They know that if something happens, we take responsibility for it. So when we recommend any developer, we take on that responsibility, that we're here, we'll work with you moving forward if anything comes up. And for them, of course, that's a foundation and a very important factor in their decision-making. So obviously, we don't know how many clients we've lost. We don't know for what reasons. But I'm sure there were people like that too. Somewhere along the way, things just didn't work out.
How many random people simply wander in directly from the street?
People do come in.
And because this is the most central street, right?
People come in. We still don't have a sign, which we also plan to put up next year. To put up, then it will attract even more people. And I know you've been to our office. In front of our office, we have a garden, an area that we also want to improve and make more accessible, a more interesting attraction point for any tourist or potential investor. That's why I think next year we'll keep working on this and developing it further. And we also have some very interesting plants for the area around our building. I'll talk about those a bit later. Everyone will find out and see for themselves. For now, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So sometimes the client comes in, sometimes by mistake, like they were looking for the massage parlor. It's not far from us, so they come to us by accident, or sometimes they come in because they saw us on Google or noticed our sign and just got curious about what this place is. Right now, we're planning to extend our office hours. Currently, our staff works from 9 to 6, but we're planning to be open from 9 to 10. We're also planning to make Saturday and Sunday work days in the future, and there's even an idea to create a sort of hub for investors, or even for potential or former clients. By the way, that's another point. We can talk about that. For us, every client is a future client, or their friend, or their family, or maybe they'll come back to us, so we want to keep them with us in our office. We're thinking about a co-working space. When you fly to Bali, you might want to keep relaxing and working, and you can come to the office. You can just have a meeting there with someone, or just work for a couple of hours. We want to set up a space like that. We want to do the same thing for developers who don't have an office in Ubud, but have projects there. Why go to a cafe and drink coffee? Please come by. We have great coffee and we'll welcome you.
Actually, as I was telling you, I encourage small developers. If we all get together and set up some kind of mini showroom or fair in the center of Google with lots of projects where we can invite clients ourselves, that would be really cool. So you're really doing the right thing. That's
100%. 100%. I think online sales are awesome. Offline sales are even more so. Even more so. It took a really long time to get this office ready. We only opened in July. Then we started getting ready for the high sale season in September. Things went a little differently. Not quite the way it usually goes on the market, you know? But again, it's actually great that things turned out the way they did. Because my opinion here today, I just want to talk about the market too. I know you're the one asking the questions here, but I want to say that the market is stabilizing. It's changing in a really cool way now, in an interesting direction. The strong players will stay. They'll definitely make it through this, and then no other markets or anything else will scare them. So I just wanted to say that opening the office, building the team, training with CRM, and actually launching marketing took a lot of time, by the way, because at first our marketing was outsourced. Now we're bringing everything in-house. Yeah, everything's in the office, and there are still a lot of setbacks, but it's necessary. So I know that setting up a board there is the easiest thing ever. Maybe they solved that issue in a week, or maybe a month. But the focus was on something else from the start.
everything aligns slowly.
So we'll keep the dogging.
That's an important question because right now we see that most of the projects developers are doing on the island, we're running into this situation more and more often where people who clearly work with foreign markets aren't satisfied with them. The various projects that we, as professional developers, are currently doing, again, mostly situated on the island, the primary challenge we face isn't so much with the projects themselves, but rather that these projects often lack proper comprehensive management. Because again, we frequently run into this specific problem. If you find a broker, the very next essential step you need is a local native speaker to assist you. And I'd like to understand from your perspective as an agency what you feel is currently lacking from developers. What do developers need to change so that Nexus would become more active in working with them? Speaking for myself, I'll say that for us this year brought a real revelation. The revelation was about the way we work, including with you, where we allocate a budget specifically for marketing. So, how well does this actually work? That's the second question. The very first question to consider is this: exactly what is missing from the current strategy? Because I have consistently found over time that when you go to an agency and ask precisely which areas should be improved or optimized, all the agencies say, "You're already doing great." And then you end up spending a lot of time and energy just to really find out what they don't like. That's why I'm now choosing the approach of not being friends with agencies. So recently I heard a really great phrase that I kept for myself. I'd rather not be friends with you, but we'll do business together. Because when you start being friends, the agency isn't always able to tell you about certain things that they're not happy with. What don't you like about developers? If you could tell the whole market right now what developers need to fix to make it easier for you to sell, what would it be?
You know, we recently had a joint meeting with your DUN, and the main issues that came up were, of course, the management company, when there's someone on the developer's team who can take care of the client after the sale. A lot of people have this at the initial stage. Right now, a lot of developers have grown over this past year, realizing that the market is changing. We're closing sales pretty well at the moment. But the post sale period stays behind the scenes, and you need to keep working there too, because that's the company's brand at every stage. So it's important to remember that client service after the sale needs to be strong enough.
We even have a podcast about this, that when we sold to a client, later the client started having questions about profitability, about working with the management company, and our not so smooth handling of this particular client situation led to one broker getting a negative outcome, even though the deal had been closed several months ago. That broker got a negative outcome and stopped selling. And because he stopped selling, other brokers also started slowing down their sales. We had to spend 10 times more time and effort to convince this broker that such a situation wouldn't happen again. Because Dima, you're absolutely right, but it's not just that it's hard to understand. It's important not only for the client who made the purchase, but also for the agency that
100% sells. Yeah, 100%. You explained it really well. And the second question is about marketing, right? About the budgets you mentioned.
Or maybe we could talk more about presentations, like how to prepare materials. I don't know. So let's put it this way. What do you definitely not like? I know this game. Right now, all the foreign agencies, they're just shouting from the rooftops about townhouses. They're saying, stop building townhouses. We need standalone villas. Some say we need native narrators. We're an agency that sells to foreigners, and then someone comes to the meeting who barely speaks English. We're not going to make a sale like that with you. I think.
These things you're talking about right now, they're really obvious. But in any case, right now, our idea and strength is still to close up to 90% of the deal with our own team. Yeah, meaning bringing the client to a meeting with the developer only when the developer can actually close the deal. And for us, this internal communication. Yeah, with the developer, actually. It's not just about picking a project because it looks nice or because of the management or because of some promises or, it's about our internal communication, how quickly we can respond, how fast we can move forward on a deal, in the sense that everything works like a well oiled machine. And these relationships are probably some of the most important ones. When everything works like a well oiled machine, do you feel like that's missing in the market? We have some developers where deals fell through just because a question that was asked actually had a really simple answer, but the delay in responding made the client suspicious, which means something must be wrong.
That's the problem. The problem is that we can't be rock stars. It's not enough.
We can't answer for you because the question was directed to the developer. Yeah, for example, and it wasn't like it was midnight or anything like that, it was a totally normal time. But sometimes the questions themselves can be unclear. Yeah, on their side, it's clear to them. I always say just get on a call. If you have a question, call right away, make an agreement, but discuss what the right answer is, not because it has to be the correct answer or anything like that, but so that you understand the point of the question, so that you're answering exactly what the client is asking, not just how you see it. Yeah,
I'll also add that there's always a game of telephone going on, and again, I'll repeat myself and you'll find yourself repeating too. The English speaking market is a market with a different mentality, one that has its own unique mindset. The questions you ask, I've seen them hundreds of times. Sometimes people don't even realize it's a question. Well, that's how it is.
that's why we also try to respond quickly when it comes to communicating with the developer side, so we can sync up on a lot of issues and not lose out over some really trivial, honestly, completely minor things that can happen. Deals have been lost because of this, so this communication within the developer team is really important. It's very important.
How much do you feel, just how important is this question right now in your country? How important is it if you have several brokers or if you have a manager in this mix?
Having good English is actually not really necessary. Yeah, that manager we're still working with. There are certain moments. We recently had a situation where someone wrote, I don't care. But the specific point that he was trying to convey was that it really does not make any significant difference at all in the Russian language. But on the actual site here, it is unfortunately interpreted and categorized as being like, yeah, I don't care, and other similar expressions of total indifference. Most of the time, people still give you the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, well, they understand that this person is there. I can't find the right speaker either. Yeah, I learned English and I still make mistakes. Everyone does, even in Russian, you know what I mean? So, what's important here is
Basically, to focus on communication.
internal communication plus the right reaction. Even if you don't know the answer to something, just say, I heard you, I understood the question, instead of going silent. That's key. I get it, a manager might have a Zoom meeting going on at the same time, and so on, and that's all fine. But if someone just doesn't know, says they'll go find out, and then goes quiet, that can have an impact. Suspicions. A lot of them come up. English speakers are always suspicious. They already have a lot of uncertainty about Bali, and then something like this just feels off.
This often applies to brokers too. Tell me, for example, Dmitry Orlovskyi, the owner of a real estate agency. In Ubud, there's a young developer who really wants to work with Nexus. How can he even get into the agency's field of view? I'll share a little secret now. If any developers are watching us, they're probably getting really antsy right now. Right now, it's absolutely a market for agencies and agents. This is the phrase that's absolutely true in the market right now. It's the developer who needs to get into the agency circle of attention, not the other way around. So, how can a young developer get noticed by an agency? And is that even possible right now? Or are you already working with a set group of developers and not considering new projects?
We do consider them. Yes, we do. First of all, in any case, we don't know you, so we won't talk to you. We're always open to communication.
But then there's a second problem that comes up, which 9 out of 10 people who come to me for advice face. They all ask the same thing. I'll just call everyone Dmitry Orlovskyi, but we went there. Philip, you say that it's very difficult to negotiate with agencies, but we went to Dima Orlovsky. They gave us some tea, told us what a great project you have. We will sell you. He says, you said it was difficult, just like that. I say, okay, 6 months pass.
No sales.
No, there are no sales either. There are no registrations, no Zoom calls, and every time we ask Dima Orlovsky, he says, great project, really great. But why aren't you selling? Well, it's a great project. And here's the question. How do you actually get an agency interested in your project? Because, let me explain, there's no feedback. I mean, in 9 cases out of 10, you as an agency never say that the project is bad. You say, yeah, it's great. And by doing this, we kind of give young developers the impression that everything's settled, that we've made a deal. I've seen this happen with all the agencies with young developers there. Yeah, we've made deals with everyone. No, you haven't made deals with anyone. Until there are sales, you haven't made a deal with anyone. So, how do you get into a top agency like Nexus? So, I've come up with just one recipe that I tell everyone. It's communication. It's communication. Of course, you need to have the right project, the right location, the right paperwork, but that's only 50%. The other 50% is building the right kind of communication with the agency.
And how do you start that communication? Actually, I want to give an example of when a developer or a new manager from a developer came to us. And he says, I'm not going to show you the projects. You'll find out about them when we actually get on the same page. What pain points do you have right now, and how can I help you? This approach opens up a completely different kind of relationship. Not when you come in and say, how much commission should I give you? How many bonuses should I offer? What else can I give you? That's all great. But when it's not really about me selling, and I can't even put the emphasis and say, like, damn, just sell this one thing, or because it benefits me. No. First of all, we look at what kind of requests we're getting from clients, right? Right now, we're really starting from the clients, from the number of clients. Let's be honest, it's a buyer's market right now. There are plenty of projects on the market. But when not everything is measured by money, and it's not just about like, let's hurry up and sell everything as fast as we can. This is an important point. What problems can we solve for you as an agency? How can we help your team make more sales, not just you personally? So honestly, this is something developers need to be told about too.
That's why I always ask agencies to be honest, because otherwise a lot of energy gets wasted. I'm also so meticulous that I can come to Ubud and say, Dima, why aren't you selling? And it turns out that, 6 months ago, somewhere an apple fell, and that apple was the reason. Basically, you just need to remove that apple and clean up. But with government agencies, there's a lot of stuff like that. I come across this a lot. So if you're a developer, dig deeper, ask questions, and build communication. That's why we now see a future for developers. It's in hiring B2B managers who build relationships with agents, because you need to communicate with them.
That's absolutely right.
Listen, this turned out to be our longest podcast. I prepared podcasts. The experimental podcast is called No Renders. You prepared some kind of blitz, 10 questions that you answer quickly. And basically, I guess that's where we'll wrap up. Are you ready?
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that's it. We're done. Thank you, Sher, for taking part in this experimental format. I think it was really cool. I've already come up with a bunch of headlines. I'll try to make them different from the ones I do elsewhere. But I think this podcast is one of the few that reveals a bit of the soul of the English-speaking client. And that's the cornerstone right now, I think, for everyone. We all wake up thinking about English-speaking clients.
Thank you for inviting me, and for trusting me with your very first episode. I hope your podcast will thrive and have lots of interesting topics, and I think we'll meet here again.
That's it. Thank you.